already know all about Wednesday. It's currently the third most popular project that Netflix has ever created, right behind Dahmer Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer story in second place, and Stranger Things in first. It's a Tim Burton series which basically asks the question, what if the Addams Family, rather than being your run-of-the-mill weird goth people, were actually supernatural? So my original plan for this video was to take a look at how this show portrays family dynamics and issues in adolescent development, since these were always the most compelling aspects of the original show for me. Because the Addamses were supposed to be the complete opposite of what your typical American family was. They were openly supportive and openly loving of each other. Kind of makes you think, huh? But once this show really got going, I found myself more interested in one of the deuteragonists, Enid Sinclair, Wednesday's roommate. While the Addams family is known for being a strong, functional unit, Enid Sinclair comes from a dysfunctional tangle. We learn in episode 1 that if she doesn't go through werewolf puberty fast enough, her family will disown her, and the dynamic only gets more complicated from there. In this video, I'm going to look at this character arc from an adolescent development perspective, look at the ways that this strengthens the narrative overall, look at the places where the narrative undercuts Enid's character arc, and then finally look at how her character arc can continue into future seasons. Ready? Let's do this. Part 1. What are werewolves? There are a lot of different fictional universes that have werewolves in them, and they all have different rules. Classically speaking, lycanthropy is a curse. At the full moon, people with lycanthropy turn into wolves and they go on a murderous rampage. They eat people, and if they manage to hurt someone but not kill them, then that person now also has lycanthropy, and the problem just keeps getting bigger. For some famous examples, think of What We Do in the Shadows or the Harry Potter universe. In these universes, werewolves are just guys with a condition who try to manage that condition as best they can. In other universes, the werewolf doesn't even know they're a werewolf. Think about Ruby from Once Upon a Time. Her grandmother tells her that the red cloak she wears will keep the wolves away because wolves hate red, when the reality is that the red cloak is spelled so that she doesn't transform into the wolf. But in her case, there's a big caveat to this general werewolves are dangerous rule. Unlike the werewolves we've already talked about, Ruby is only dangerous when she's unconscious of being the wolf, or when she tries to reject that part of herself. When she dissociates, that's when the wolf takes over. It's a story about the danger of distancing yourself from or refusing to acknowledge the parts of yourself that are ugly or unpleasant. It's not a good thing, at least it's not an uncomplicated thing, but it's manageable. Wednesday takes this one step further for Enid Sinclair. Being a werewolf in this universe is something that the werewolf characters get from their family, and the pack continues to be one of the core social groups throughout their lifetime. We learn about this dynamic through 2 key character beats. The first of these is her conversation with Wednesday on the balcony. She tells Wednesday that she's not yet a full werewolf. She can grow claws and she's pretty strong, but she doesn't yet transform. She's a late bloomer.
Why aren't you wolfing out?
Because I can't. That's all I got. My mom says some wolves are late bloomers.
Because she's taken so long to wolf out, she might never be able to.
But I've been to the best lycanologist. Had to fly to Milwaukee, would you believe it? You know, she says there's a chance I might never,
And there are some really steep stakes to this. If she doesn't become a real werewolf, she'll get turned out of her family and she'll have to go it alone.
What happens then?
I'd become a lone wolf.
This idea really scares her, and because of this, her desire to be a werewolf isn't some unalloyed thing. It's just as much about her not wanting to be abandoned by her family as it is about her authentically wanting to be a werewolf.
My life would be officially over. I'd be kicked out of my family pack with no prospect of finding a mate.
I'm failing to see the problem here.
I could die alone.
The second important character beat is her subplot during family weekend. Her mom shows up and immediately starts criticizing her. She's too pale, she's not taking care of herself.
Let me look at you.
1,000. 2,000.
Have you not been waxing?
3 seconds. That's a personal best.
Are you feeling well? You're looking a touch anemic. Have you been eating enough red meat?
Enid doesn't like the fact that her mom is criticizing her, but she does want a relationship with her mom. So later, when her mom asks, "So, are you gonna make me ask?"
Are you gonna make me ask?
she starts sharing with her mom something that matters to her. She starts telling her about this boy she's seeing.
Ajax and I haven't defined our relationship yet.
Her mom dismisses this and clarifies that she had been asking if Enid had wolfed out yet or not, taking the conversation back into territory that she cares about.
I'm not talking about boys. Have you wolfed out yet?
Enid says that no, she hasn't yet, and her mom says, well, that's a disappointment.
Well, that is a disappointment.
Now, on some level, her mom realizes that they got off on the wrong foot, so she gives Enid a little gift, which turns out to be brochures for wolf camp.
What are these?
Brochures? For summer camp.
These aren't just ordinary summer camps. So camps for lycanthropy conversion?
Basically, the idea of wolf camp is to help the late bloomers bring out the werewolf.
It worked wonders for your cousin Lucille, didn't it? 7 weeks in the Balkan countryside and she was howling at the moon in no time, as it should be.
Enid doesn't like this idea at all. She compares it to conversion camp and she rejects the idea outright.
Then you want to send me to conversion therapy for werewolves?
By the end of the episode, Enid puts her foot down with her mom.
You'll need to pick which activities.
No, I don't. Because I'm not going. Not this summer, not ever.
She's not going to wolf camp, and her mom needs to decide to love her daughter for who she is rather than for who she wants her to be.
I just hope that one day you'll finally be able to accept me for who I am.
Her mom doesn't go for this, but her dad gives her a big hug. You know, it's very Pride and Prejudice.
I'm proud of you, kiddo. You do you.
So, I've got some thoughts about this, and I'd like to start by taking a look at how the comparison between wolf camp and conversion camp works in a narrative sense. Part 2, what is conversion camp? Conversion therapy in general is when parents notice that their kid is starting to act kind of gay, so they send him to therapy in hopes that the therapist will be able to convince him not to do that. This can look like a lot of different things, but they all circle around the idea that being gay isn't acceptable either in the family or in the broader community, and that there are better options that'll make the kid happier in the long run, i.e. being straight. Conversion camp then is one step further. It takes conversion therapy and it makes it a live-in experience. This all might start with talk therapy, but it quickly gets into abusive territories. They'll use shock therapies and aversion therapies, basically treating LGBT identity like an addiction. So they'll go on zapping these kids with exactly as much success as you'd imagine you'd get if you zapped a kid until their hair changed color. And you might be thinking, even if it's legal to try and convert a kid to heterosexuality, there must be rules on the books keeping them from bodily harm, right? Well, most of the time, whether these laws are on the books or not is beside the point. Camps are, generally speaking, in secluded areas, and the activities go on behind closed doors. As an outsider, you might never know what's going on behind closed doors unless you made it your business to know. And people are really good at not making it their business to know about these things, especially if they kind of suspect that they might kind of agree with what's going on behind those closed doors. But the camps themselves are only one of two problems. The other problem is that the parents who put their kids in conversion camps show a real lack of regard about their children's well-being. Perhaps most profoundly, these parents show that their love is conditional, that they aren't there for their children no matter what, that they don't want to be parents to their child's authentic self. This betrayal is arguably the most harmful thing about conversion camp, as evidenced by this stark graph. On the right, we see that LGBT youth are high risk for suicide. 11% will attempt to take their own life. And then on the left, we see that if a parent threatens to send their kid to conversion camp, that risk rises 2.5 times. It barely matters if they actually send the kid to conversion camp or not, because they've communicated the important bit. The kid hears the message loud and clear. I see who you are. I don't like it. If you keep this up, I don't want to be your parent anymore. The good news is that the law is generally moving in the right direction. While there are no federal laws yet, 20 states and the District of Columbia have laws that outright ban conversion therapy for minors. It's not conversion camp, that's all conversion therapy for minors. 6 states and 1 territory have partial bans, and then there are 3 states which have a ban on bans, which is why we need a federal law, and the rest are resolutely agnostic on the issue. And that might not sound like a lot, and it isn't nearly enough, but 3/4 of those laws protecting LGBT youth were passed in the last 7 years, so things are moving in the right direction, at least with regards to this. So that's conversion camp. Now let's draw the comparison in part 3, wolf camp. When talking about Enid, there's a pretty big difference between wolf camp and conversion camp, which you may have spotted already. Conversion camp focuses on a qualitative change. Parents assume that their kid should be straight, see that he's growing up to be gay, and put him in conversion camp so that he'll grow up to be straight. Enid, on the other hand, is a werewolf. She has werewolf parents, she wants to be a part of werewolf society, and she has secondary werewolf characteristics. That is, she can grow claws and is super strong even when she's not transformed.
It's a werewolf thing.
Unlike the gay kid whose parents assume that he should be straight, Enid is a werewolf. She's just not done developing. She actually reminds me of those girls who are like 15 or 16 and they're really anxious because they still haven't gotten their periods yet, and so they go to the doctor to get a big horse shot full of estrogen, just sort of get things going. It's not a matter of conversion because you're not taking one thing and making it another thing. You're taking that thing and making it more of the same thing. More to the point, it speeds along the process of helping them become the person that they want to be. That isn't to say that this doesn't work. Not all allegories and illusions have to be a perfect 1-1, so let's take a look under the hood, so to speak. Enid wants to be a werewolf. Why? Well, because she's afraid of losing her family. Why? Because her mom is always telling her that she's not good enough. You're too pale.
You're looking a touch anemic.
Don't you want to be normal?
Don't you want to wolf out and finally be normal?
No one likes a desperate little furball.
I know what my mom would say. Enid, you're a doormat. You're too needy. Show some teeth. Nobody likes a desperate little furball. Shut up, Mom. Get out of my head.
Why? Because she doesn't think that she can love her daughter if she's not a fully developed werewolf. Enid realizes during Parents' Weekend that her mom's love for her is conditional on her becoming a werewolf. It's something that her brothers didn't notice because they wolfed out on time, and maybe she wouldn't have noticed it either if she had developed along her mom's schedule, but she didn't, and now she knows that her mom's love is conditional, and now that she sees it, she can't unsee it. And that's a much more interesting conflict than the purely physical, will she become a werewolf one. It offers a really interesting conundrum. On one hand, Enid wants to be a werewolf and camp will make her a werewolf. But on the other hand, she wants her mom's unconditional love. And if she goes to camp, then she can't have her mom's unconditional love because she'll be fulfilling the condition for her mom's love. So the self-respecting thing to do is to decline wolf camp and to insist that her mom love the daughter she has rather than the daughter she wishes she had. And her mom doesn't accept this, but her dad's clearly very proud of her. And this is important because whether we're dealing with a fantasy identity or one in the real world, having one supportive parent makes a huge difference. And that brings us to part 4. How the show undermines this arc. Enid's choice not to go to wolf camp does 2 things. First, it shows that she has enough self-respect not to contort herself into the thing her mom wants her to be in order to receive conditional love. And that's a great character beat. The second thing it does is that it potentially delays wolfing out, giving her mom more time to come around to loving her unconditionally. This would then open the door for a third character beat. Earlier in the video, I mentioned that Enid wants to be a werewolf so that she doesn't lose her family and her community. She wants to be a werewolf, but at least part of that want is based in fear. There's not a whole lot of joy that we see in her desire to become a werewolf. But if her mom were to come around to loving her no matter what, and if she felt more secure in her family bonds, that would open the way for a more authentic sense of wanting to be a werewolf for her own sake. Both of these would be really interesting ways to wrap up the character arc. However, in the finale, Enid does become a werewolf, and she does it before her mom has a chance to come around to loving her daughter unconditionally, and it happens before Enid has a chance to want to be a werewolf for herself rather than for her mom and for her family. It undermines the character arc that they'd written and is ultimately kind of disappointing.
Well, that is a disappointment.
So, let's ask by way of conclusion, where does the show go from here? Nothing I've said so far should suggest that the character arc is ruined. People struggle with things all the time that don't get resolved properly because circumstances change. Then it's not just in real life either, where things are messy and don't follow neat character arcs. There's a famous example in Downton Abbey. Oh man, this is convoluted. Okay, super basic rundown. Matthew is the heir to the estate. The lady of the estate is not his mom. They're distant relatives. The lady of the estate gets pregnant. If the baby is a boy, then Matthew is no longer the heir and the baby is the heir. Matthew and the oldest daughter, who had been the fiance to the last heir who died on the Titanic, he doesn't matter, she and Matthew have been having a little flirtation, and she is told that she needs to decide before the baby comes, because if she doesn't want him when he might be poor, then he won't want her when he will be rich. Right? The lady of the house slips on a bar of soap and loses the baby. So now Matthew is still the heir to the estate, but Mary's decision has been undercut because the timeline moved up. She thought that she'd have more time, and she didn't. Now, if the writers had tried to move on as if nothing had happened, that would be sloppy and bad writing. But the writers didn't do that. The character beat isn't ruined because the writers don't ignore all this tension they've built. Does she just want to marry Matthew so that she can stay in her childhood home? Who's to say? Can they move past this? Let's find out. So for Wednesday, it would not be a waste if Enid were to recognize that her mother had had the opportunity to love her unconditionally and hadn't. Can they work past it? Let's watch them try. And that's not the only character thread I'd like to see Enid work on. She also has a tendency to shoulder other characters' emotional beats for them. Early on we see her do this with her mom, but later we see her do this with Wednesday too. Remember that huge fight they got into when Wednesday tricked Enid into going monster hunting and put her into some pretty serious physical danger?
Tonight was just the icing on the birthday cake you couldn't even be bothered to cut. You will use anyone to get what you want, even if it means putting them in danger. We could have died tonight because of your stupid obsession.
Well, in the very next episode, she forgives Wednesday for seemingly no reason.
Why the sudden change of heart?
Because we work. We shouldn't, but we do. It's like some sort of weird friendship anomaly.
They don't so much resolve their fight as Enid decides to forgive Wednesday prematurely, before Wednesday has an opportunity to reflect on her behavior and maybe even apologize. It's not ideal, either as a character beat or from an interpersonal perspective, because it doesn't address the actual problems between the two of them. The writers can strengthen the former by addressing the latter head on. Learning to give other characters the space and time they need in order to grow and fix themselves would be a difficult lesson for Enid to learn, but it would leave her happier as a person, and more importantly for the show, would be a compelling character beat to watch play out over the course of the story. With season 2 all but confirmed, and Jenna Ortega saying she wants a darker story in the future, I think there's real hope that the writers might bring in some of these themes. Let me know your predictions in the comments, and if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe.